Here by Danny Haifon, contributing editor at the Black Agenda Report. Also has the Left Lens YouTube channel, along with Margaret Kimberly is often on there. They have guests, do different live streams. Definitely support Danny and Black Agenda Report if you can. They do great work. Title of this one: Joe Biden is wrong. Capitalism is exploitation. And again, if you actually are a honest actor, it's pretty clear you have to come to that conclusion that capitalism is inherently exploitive. COVID-19 pandemic has produced numerous examples of disaster capitalism and spectacular profits for billionaires. So, a term made popular by author Naomi Klein describes the many ways in which massive profits are accumulated from tragedy. Hurricane Katrina provides one of the starkest examples of the parasitic nature of capitalism. After the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans was decimated and countless black Americans uprooted, the public school system was privatized in its entirety. The COVID-19 pandemic has also produced numerous examples of disaster capitalism. Bezos seen his profits grow handsomely over the past year amid mass death and economic devastation. And again, that's the dialectics, the contradiction of capitalism. You have on one hand, a couple people increasing their wealth by the billions, tens or hundreds of billions. In this case, while a massive majority are homeless, say not massive majority, but massive number of people are homeless, don't have health insurance, don't have jobs, don't have any savings. So you have that massive amount of people on one end, and then you have a couple people way at the top doing really well while everybody else, is living this very, very precarious existence. And that's, inherent to the capitalist system. Major limitation of the term disaster capitalism is that it insinuates another that's true, is possible. The myth that capitalism is not inherently exploitive or predatory is nothing new to the U.S. Since the end of World War II, the liberal economists such as Robert Reich have argued a gentler form of capitalism is possible, so as long as New Deal type reforms are permanent fixture of the economic life. Yet no amount of regulations or protections negate the fact that capitalism doesn't merely profit from disaster. It is the disaster. And again, the Marx and the whole surplus labor theory of value, right? You go to work for a capitalist, you generate, you create wealth through your labor, but you don't get all of that back. That is inherently exploitive. You're not, I don't know, how do people not understand that if they're actually being honest actors? Well, they're probably not, or they just, I'm not going to think about it too much. I just want to, regurgitate this, capitalist propaganda. The owners of capital, the capitalist class, rely on a myriad of institutions to convince the mass. Huge propaganda network. Government officials and politicians tend to be the most openly vocal champions of capitalism due to their leadership role over the state, the organization responsible for enforcing the suppression of one class for the benefit of another, which is what, a state is, what a government is. And what we have in the U.S. is obviously the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, the owners of the means of production for their benefit, while the working class, the proletariat, is being oppressed by the state, by the capitalist class. In his announcement of executive order comprised of a host of regulations, Joe Biden carried on this extraordinary tradition by claiming that capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation. Jesus. And again, it's not super surprising that Joe Biden is saying this absolute fucking garbage, but it needs to be called out because not everybody, unfortunately, accurately views capitalism as being inherently exploitive, which it is, and that's a problem. Problem with Biden's formulation is that exploitation lies at the very root of capitalism. Capitalist competition has always rested at the foundation of the U.S. settler colonies' economic base. Land theft, genocide, and mass enslavement of indigenous and African nations gave the U.S. an early competitive advantage over Western European rivals in the quest for global profit and supremacy. And again, the drive for profit, unique to capitalism itself, because again, we're not generating wealth to actually, improve the material conditions of the people. We're generating wealth to increase, the profit margins, the profit motive for the capitalist class who are exploiting the proletariat who generates that profit for them. Capitalist competition has led to dozens of wars amongst capitalist powers. World War II, a war over colonial possessions, killed 3% of the world's pop, the majority occurring in China and the Soviet Union. It needs to be pointed out that the Soviet Union is the reason that World War II was won, not the United States. History is clear that capitalist competition is sustained by an intense level of violence toward oppressed nations and classes, but outright violence in the form of war is the only most naked form of exploitation inherent to capitalism. Capitalism is a system of production based on the accumulation of private profit. Yes, capitalists own the means of production for this purpose, and workers must sell their labor to them to survive. You don't work, you die, more or less. I mean, there's probably obviously by design that there's no social safety net. You have to go sell your body, sell your labor in order to survive in the U.S. and many other capitalist countries, but obviously the U.S. to a greater extent because it's such a capitalist hellhole. On the surface, this exchange appears fair and democratic. Workers receive a wage for their labor so they can purchase basic necessities and perhaps become rich themselves. Joe Biden is just the latest mouthpiece of the capitalist class to boast of the opportunities that supposedly arise for workers under the regime of capitalist competition. Capitalist competition is defined by several contradictions, all of which form a nexus of exploitation for the working class. Biden's executive order is reflective of a very important contradiction within this nexus. The policy is geared towards addressing excessive mergers, yet monopoly is exactly what capitalist competition generates. In the hunt to maximize profits, capitalists seek to consolidate the capital necessary to expand production at the lowest possible cost. Again, it's always capitalism always having to think of new ways to reinvent itself in order to continuing to generate more profits, because again, it's a system based on infinite growth, but we're on a finite planet. Kind of problematic, right? Monopolization is a natural byproduct of capitalist competition, which socializes the production processes and intensifies the exploitation of the laboring classes. Competition which, and also, socializes the cost of capitalism while privatizing, the profits, obviously, as well. That needs to be said, I think. But before a capitalist enterprise can compete, it must first extract surplus value from the workers who sell their labor in exchange for a wage. Workers are paid just enough to reproduce themselves. Whatever is left over from the exchange value of a commodity is pocketed by the capitalist as unpaid labor. The capitalist then uses its dictatorial ownership of the profits to expand the enterprise, invest in new technology, and of course enrich themselves. However, the lust to squeeze every drop of surplus value from the working class has limits. The toiling masses can't possibly consume the value that they produce, nor can they be allowed to perish from starvation on a total scale, despite hunger being a widespread problem under global capitalism. I mean, it makes me think of the workers on strike at that Frito-Lay factory. Was it in Missouri, Iowa, somewhere in the general Midwest of the U.S., being forced to work 84 hours a week. I think they got less than, this one worker's talking about how they got less than $1 raise in 12 years of working there. A worker actually died on the production line there, and rather than, maybe shut down the fucking factory because somebody fucking died, they just put somebody in their place. This is what they're talking about when Danny Haifong talks about the capitalist system needing to squeeze every last drop of surplus value from the working class. An economic crisis ensues whereby excess capital, otherwise known as overproduction, that's why, under socialism, you have a planned economy to meet the needs of the people. Because, again, in a capitalist system, it's actually cheaper to throw food in the fucking garbage than it is to give to hungry people that need it. That's why, we have 40% of the food in the U.S. goes to waste, yet we have millions of people, including children, that go hungry, because capitalism isn't designed to meet the needs of the people, it's designed to generate profit for the capitalist class. As capitalist enterprises compete, the tendency to monopolize is hastened by the dual incentive to keep production costs down, especially the cost of labor. I was alluding to that a second ago. An economic crisis at bay is for as long as possible. Monopoly then leads to imperialism. Imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism, which Lenin correctly pointed out, in which finance capital assumes a commanding role in the reproduction of the system. The U.S. capitalist system is indeed in its most advanced stage of imperialist development. Finance capital provides endless credit to all sectors of the economy and has profited immensely from the speculation as productive investment becomes steadily more costly and saturated. Workers in the U.S. are burdened with a myriad of debts in the form of unpaid medical expenses, student loans, automobile leases, credit card bills, and mortgages. Imperialism has facilitated the growth of debt by expanding supply chains into every nook and cranny of the planet. This has not only worsened the condition of labor, it has also increased the cost of production in the aggregate and placed downward pressure on long-term profits, a trend also known as the rate of profit. Finance capitalists have responded to these contradictions by subsidizing massive short-term gains for speculative schemes, mergers, and cost-cutting austerity measures. The dominance of finance capital is therefore dependent upon super-exploitation of the working class abroad and the low-wage production occurring anywhere from Alabama to Bangladesh. Surplus value extraction remains an essential feature of capitalism, regardless of how far the capitalist class has gone to obscure the social relations of the system. The theft of value from workers in all corners of the globe has led to obscene levels of inequality and rendered overproduction a permanent fixture of capitalism. What is it, like 2 or 3 people in the U.S. own more than the bottom half, so over like 150 million people. More than 100 million people have fallen into extreme poverty since COVID-19 pandemic began more than a year ago, and yet, we have the billionaire class seeing, record-breaking levels of wealth on their end. The Biden's administration's inadequate stimulus package and regulation failed to address the exploitation at the core of capitalism. It is thus unsurprising that a system which offers so little to so many, completely true, has emphasized state repression, wanting to, crack down and censor people on social media is one example. The persecution of the whistleblowers continues under Biden. And war, look what they're still doing in Syria, dropping bombs in Somalia, ratcheting up the economic warfare against Cuba, keeping the sanctions in place in Syria, Venezuela, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, etc., Nicaragua. U.S. capitalism is the undeniable leader in the war industry with no shortage of clientele. Trillions of U.S. dollars are spent on wars abroad to keep the resource-rich global south disunited and China and Russia contained. The U.S. is also home to the world's most advanced surveillance system, nearly a quarter of the world's prisoners. Okay, we got 2 more here. The war at home relegates a large section of Black America to permanent underclass status and larger portion of the pop compliant with declining living standards. Endless war abroad keeps U.S. capital dominant in the global market. Foreign adversaries serve as scapegoats for merchants of death whose profits thrive from the manufacture, consent, developing non-stop demonization campaigns against nations such as Cuba, Iran, DPRK, just to name a few, as I did as well. On point, again, that you're not going to get this type of analysis from the synthetic left, from the pseudo left. You're not going to get this type of analysis from TYT or the majority report. So it's super important to support these left anti-imperialist voices like Danny Haiphong in the Black Agenda reports. None of this has changed in a fundamental way under Joe Biden's regime. In fact, Biden's policies, coupled with the ideological return of good capitalism, threaten to arrest the development of socialist and anti-imperialist political consciousness in the years to come. A more stable ruling class provides no panacea from a world of capitalist system seeking respite from an unprecedented moment of crisis. Capitalism is defined by exploitation. Yes, 100%. Again, if you disagree with that, I would love to really hear how you argue that capitalism isn't inherently exploitative just by its nature. Its continued supremacy guarantees more violence, poverty, and environmental destruction, not less. The best hope for the class struggle in the U.S. is for emerging activists and organizers to engage in a serious study of capitalism, its history, how it works, and what the exploited and oppressed have done and continue to do to put an end to its tyranny. Again, this is from Danny Haiphong, contributing editor of the Black Agenda Report. This book, I have this book by him and Robert Servant. It's excellent. American Exceptionalism and American Innocence, A People's History of Fake News from the Revolutionary War to the War on Terror. Gotta end the video now. My partner is calling me. Peace. Much love. Subscribe for more content if you can.